Welcome back to the show. My guy, Jonah Dillon of the Commercial Appeal, tapping in with me today. Got to talk a little football, at least shortly, even though we're not really in that kind of time of the year. Spring football underway for the Memphis Tigers. We're through a couple of weeks now. Memphis coming off an 11-win season, but have to replace quarterback Seth Hennigan, who was the 4-year starter. They will have only one starter returning on defense. That's William Whitmore Jr. Spring game will be April the 26th. That's a little over 2 weeks from today. Jonah, you cover this team extensively the last couple of years. What are some of the biggest questions the Tigers are trying to answer here in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, who's going to be on the field, right? Like you just said, basically, we talked about it throughout last season. Like the senior class that they had, obviously Seth Hennigan, kind of the headliner, but there were so many guys last year who played key roles, not just last season, but really for the past couple of years. And last season kind of felt like the end of something. And this year feels like the start of something new, and we don't really know what it's going to be. And so it starts at quarterback, right? Brendan Lewis is a guy who came in from Nevada as a transfer. He's got extensive experience as a starter, and definitely somebody who right now is kind of the front runner to be Memphis' starting quarterback when they kick off next season. And it's going to be weird for everybody when the game starts and somebody other than Seth Hennigan, I was going to say his number, but obviously he changes number every year, so it doesn't even matter. Number two will be back there, at quarterback, but number two was back there in 2023 for Memphis also. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say right now, offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey told me before the season started that Brandon Lewis had to step up in the quarterback competition. It makes sense considering basically everybody else in that room has never played a really meaningful snap. Harris Boyd, who was the backup last year, played I think one meaningful snap last year when Seth Hennigan went out with an injury, and so there's really no experience outside of him. He's started at Colorado, he started at Nevada, and he's obviously the front runner, but I think that's the story because obviously fans are very excited about AJ Hill. He's one of the highest ranked recruits Memphis has ever gotten. It was a huge story nationally when he committed to Memphis last summer. Obviously, a lot of schools, Florida was after him. A lot of schools across the country wanted him, and he chose to come to Memphis. And so people are excited. At the same time, this is a 17-year-old kid who's just arrived this spring, and it's still very raw. He's somebody who a lot of people are excited about, but at the same time, he's kind of a project type player in the sense that he's got a lot to learn, but he's obviously got the intangibles. And so kind of following that will be a big story, not just in the spring, but throughout the summer to see how he develops, even though Brandon Lewis right now seems like the guy who's most likely to be the starter when the season kicks off in August.
How do you feel like Ryan Silverfield balances that tightrope? I'm sure part of the pitch that he was given to Hill was, hey, Seth Hennigan left quite the legacy here. He started as a freshman. You have an opportunity to do something similar. I'm sure he thought, the keys to the car could potentially be his in year one. How do you think they, do that balancing act of, evaluating where he is and if he could be the starter day one moving forward, or, going with the competition and the guy who does have more experience in Brandon Lewis?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely a competition, right? There's no, it's not done by any means, and so AJ Hill will have every opportunity, as will everybody else in that room, to set themselves apart and prove that they should be the starter. I think, obviously, the conversation with him is, like you said, I think that was part of the pitch for AJ to come here was, look, Seth Hennigan started as a true freshman and held onto the job for 4 years. But at the same time, I think Ryan Silverfield and the rest of the coaching staff, they know that when Seth Hennigan started, there were some growing pains, and this is a roster and a team that really is primed to compete for the college football playoff for that group of five spot every single year. And so do you want to spend a year with growing pains working on a new quarterback, especially in this day and age of college football, even in the past couple of years, since Seth Hennigan got here? Someone has a really good year as a starter at a group of five school, they're probably not going to play for that team the next year, right? With the transfer portal, it's remarkable that Seth Hennigan stayed in Memphis for 4 years, especially with the opportunities that he had, after his third year. And so even if your goal is to develop somebody, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to stay there. And so I think you have to weigh that when you're making decisions of what gives us the best chance to win this year, even though you're trying to develop guys. And Memphis is still trying to do that. There's a lot of players across the roster who have been with this program multiple years and are going to play a bigger role this year. And I know that Ryan Silverfield and the whole staff, they want to still be a developmental program. But at the same time, you've got to do you got to do what's in the team's best interest to win every single year when you have those expectations. And this is a team that's probably going to be picked to win the AAC preseason again. And so they've got to figure out what the best way to kind of navigate that is in the short term. And so obviously coming in, you just look at it on paper with Brendan Lewis, and it seems like he's obviously got that experience, but look, they're the ones watching them in practice every day. And so I think we'll know more when we get closer to the start of the season.
So we got to talk about the defensive side of the ball as well. You had the article about William Whitmore Jr. deciding to enter the transfer portal, but then stick with the Memphis Tigers. He will be the lone returning starter on the defensive side of the ball. What are some of the bigger questions that you think Jordan Hankins, the defensive coordinator, is trying to answer as far as what that defensive unit looks like? You think linebacker will be one of the biggest competition spots, yeah?
Yeah. First of all, Whitlow, how dare you? Second of all, I gotta be here for the fact checking.
Fact checking is
but
important.
Like you said,
that is on me.
Now I'm never gonna get invited back. But when I went out, it was a fun time. Look, he's the starter. He's going to be one of the starters. He's going to be kind of the focal point of the defense. And then in the back, Cortland Marsh was somebody who was kind of slated to be a starter at the beginning of last season, was injured, came back towards the end of the year and played really well. And so I would expect him to be another returning starter, sort of. Obviously, he didn't start like the season opener, but he's a safety, and so he'll be in there too. Aside from that, it's a lot of spots up for grabs. And basically this defense lost. The linebacking core was the heart of the team. Obviously, we know what Chandler Martin did last year. Elijah Herring and Matt Hudson both had really good seasons too. Everybody's gone. Chandler Martin left early for the draft. Elijah Herring transferred, went to Florida State. Matt Hudson was out of eligibility. And so you need new linebackers. And Jordan Hankins, the kind of thing about his defense is he wants to play as many linebackers as he can. And so he brought in a lot of guys in the transfer portal. And that's one of the biggest stories, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is his opportunity to assess all these players defensively and who's going to play the most. Sam Brumfield, Drew Watts, Everett Rousseau, a lot of guys. Jaden Flaker, who was here last year. There's a lot of names in that room, and I think that's kind of the open position in terms of spring ball. Is like there's 3 spots at least up for grabs in that room, and he's trying to see who's going to kind of rise in that competition. And then a lot of the other competitions too. I mean, cornerback, they lost both their starters, lost a lot of depth guys too, and so there's been a lot of new faces. I think that's going to be a big thing. Even in the spring game, is like trying to point out new numbers of guys who are playing defense, because there's not going to be a lot of faces that fans are going to recognize. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins those competitions as we get closer to the start.